Hey Dan, thank you so much for joining me for this culture talk on Italy. I'm so happy to have you and to learn the story behind your restaurant, your brand Bavaro's. So tell me a little bit about you and what you do over there at the restaurant when you started and kind of how the story started.
Yeah, so I'm the founder and CEO of Bavaros, and we've just celebrated our 12th year in business. It started in Tampa, Florida, but originally I'm from New Jersey. And a little history about myself. I was in transportation for, I'd say, probably 7 years. We used to chauffeur bank executives and movie stars. And then when I was 25, I decided to sell the business, and the only other thing I knew was restaurants, and I wanted to get into pizza because I'm from the Northeast New Jersey, so I love New York and New Jersey pizza. But I didn't want to open up a traditional, slice joint that you would see on the corner. So I wanted something that had some history, some real culture, and obviously I'm Italian descent. My father's side was Bari, a small town called Giovinazzo, and on my mother's side, they migrated from Napoli. So looking back into our culture and history, I stumbled upon Neapolitan pizza. This is probably like back in 2004, 2005 when I started to research this. And in the United States at that time, there was a place in New York City, and there was a place in Seattle that was making traditional Neapolitan pizza. So I kind of honed in on the one in New York, and then I just started to visit other pizzerias that did different types of pizza from different regions of the globe. And I said, what better than this? Dude, let's go Napoli. So, we were. I don't know how many people know this or even care, but we take pride in it that Bavaro's actually was one of the first 15 Neapolitan pizzerias in the country to pioneer this concept to the United States.
Wow, and that was just a decade or so ago that you were able to do that.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
when you think of kind of the immigration history and how long the concept of pizza in general has been in the U.S. and not just New York where they're on every corner, but the fact that you're so intentional about representing that, and from your mother's side, it sounds like too the Neapolitan side of your own background and
Correct.
your own history and your family. So that's really great. That's so tell me a little bit about you know your family owned, family run. You and your wife, you started
Correct.
this, and
Yeah.
how do you feel that in that when you were doing that research and kind of you know really wanted to personify the history of the Neapolitan culture and bringing that here to the Tampa Bay area. How would you kind of characterize that in terms of an expertise in cultural expression? So, what are some ways that you feel that were really important to you to establish in the Bavara's, brand? How those things are translated from, say, the Neapolitan way of the craft, and then the way that you all represent it here.
So I'll tell you just about any cuisine that comes from its origins, any type of food that travels to the US,
Hmm.
90% of it changes while it gets here. And then over time, it evolves and morphs into something different from what it originally was. So, we wanted to make sure that no matter what we were doing, when we were doing it, that we stay true to what we were representing. So that's what really keeps me and our team inspired, is that no matter what's going on in the economy, we're honed in on this. And
Yeah.
that education to the consumer, I didn't realize at the time was going to be so challenging as it was, because everybody has pizza in their mind as it comes in a box. You pick it up and it stays straight, and it's supposed to be a little greasy, and it's got all these toppings on it that are just piled on top, and that's pizza, right?
Hmm.
Talk about '09 opening up, especially in Florida, who's kind of last to see food migrate. It's like
Hmm.
usually it hits New York or these big cities throughout the United States. We planted the flag in Florida, probably the first to really do it right, not just say that it's Italian pizza or traditional Neapolitan pizza, but I can guarantee you we were the ones doing it right from day one. Um, there was an education that I didn't realize, fork and knife. Originally, we weren't cutting pizzas like they do in Italy. And guests were just like, what is this? Why is it flopping? It's not cooked. Why is there so little toppings? Why does the
Mm-hmm.
cheese look and taste like this? And,
Mm-hmm.
it took a lot to take that in. And at the same time, I had people around me that supported us saying,
Mm-hmm.
look, no one's going to get it. No one cares. You got to do what people are accustomed to. But deep inside, we all knew, my wife and I were like, we have to stay true to what we're doing here. This is a movement. This is something new. And we have to hold our ground and educate. So
Yeah.
we spent years educating. So every TV segment I was on, every news article in our branding and our newsletters would be fork and knife. This is how they do it in Italy. 100-year-old yeast culture we're using, double zero flour, San Marzano tomatoes. We were like speaking a different language to people who didn't actually travel to Naples, which not everybody's been to Naples, Italy for the pizza. But
Mm-hmm.
those that did go came back and they helped us get that education out because they would justify it, verify what we're doing is traditional Neapolitan pizza. And one thing that helped us, there was a very well-known food critic in Tampa Bay who wrote national publications, who obviously traveled to Naples. And when she found us, she helped us get on the map with that education. And this is what to expect when you go to Bavaro's. This is what you're going to, and that kind of like justified it. It's like, oh, well, she said they're doing it right. So it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Say,
Right. Yeah. No, I hear
so
you. Um, and the fact that, you know, that's a testament to your family so that, kind of, I don't know whether that was your ancestors giving you that energy and saying, stick to it. You're doing it right.
that's it
You're
here. That's just like the guy,
right.
plus we opened in '09. It was like,
Yeah.
a financial crisis,
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
For
really
sure.
tough times,
Yeah.
to get through. So it was all that
Hmm.
plus the education,
Yeah.
and you just stay true to yourself, and
Yeah. For sure, and it kind of echoes that very family oriented way of Italy and the Mediterranean in general is very family oriented. So to stick to your guns is kind of ingrained in people, and so but you're doing that out of love, like you said. It's from the heart. It's like this is really great. Just give it a try and just learn. And it's
yeah,
almost like even a better experience. When you look at the history of pizza and the fact that it does vary so even regionally in the country, you know, it is something to be proud of, and that's great that you guys have been able to do that. So, if you talk about the cultural story, I know that's kind of your keystone. If you think of your menu, right? There's a lot of other things that you all offer
correct. Yes,
in terms of.
bolognese sauce from Bologna.
Mhm.
You have the cheeses from Emilia Romagna, and the Parma. I mean, everything that we do has like a culture and a history and a region of San Marzano tomato, Mount Vesuvius. It's really, if you really analyze what we're doing, and our recipes are just a world. It's really bringing that old history and old food culture from the motherland back, into the United States and just sticking to it.
Yeah, and so if you think about kind of the cultural story behind the menu choices, talk about that a little bit more. Where your keystone is your family history, kind of the homage. So let's talk a little bit more about the cultural story behind the menu itself, and your menu
Sure.
choices. If you think of you mentioned some of the regions in Italy, and some of them might be characterized by popularity or just in general. So how do you feel that some of the, like the salads and the charcuterie and some of those other items that you add, the small plates, how do you feel that accompanies or complements, the Neapolitan side of, say, like the pizzas are very much focused on that Southwest region, but then how's the rest of the other menu or the menu characterized?
Yeah, I'll tell you how that kind of evolved. When we first opened, we were solely pizza and salads. And that was probably like the first 2 years. And when we opened Bavaro's, I manned the pizza oven for the first 5.5 years myself. We were open 5.5 days a week, and every single shift I made pizza so I could learn the business, learn every aspect. So therefore, at some point, I could train people properly. I had to become a master of the craft. So what we started to realize is as the economy started to come back and people were out dining more, that I was getting my butt kicked on the oven. Just having pizza as the only entree. You'd have tables come in, 6 people, 8 people, 10 people, and then to goes. And then like one person would come in and then order like a margarita pizza, and they wouldn't have anything to hold them over until everybody else's food was made, and then they would get theirs. So we're like, all right, what are we going to do? So we first introduced the charcuterie at a smaller scale of what we're doing now. And then we wound up introducing pastas into the menu. But the whole idea was to create offerings for people that didn't want something, they wanted something more than just pizza, or, they wanted to share something before their entrees had come. But we're at a point right now that we stick to the idea of we're going to source from Italy. We're going to buy the best we could possibly get from the regions that we choose to develop our menu from, right? And then we're going to offer it the best way that we possibly know how, which is from scratch, following old world recipes. So as long as we hone in on that and not solely focus only on Neapolitan cuisine, I think we're fine. We're in the guidelines of what we represent, and that's just, a guest coming in, they come to our restaurant and they know, look, I'm going to get a real Italian food from different parts of Italy, but I know if we're going to Bavaro's, it's going to be the best they could possibly source and prepared at the most traditional way that they would know how to make it. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, our focus on Neapolitan pizza stays on Neapolitan pizza. It doesn't go Roman. It doesn't go, at different parts of the regions of Italy. It's solely Neapolitan.
Right. Yeah. And that's a great way. Like I said, it's kind of the keystone. It's your roots, right? That's like your roots are what started you those, years ago. And then, you kind of build on that and you realize, I'm sure, kind of how it's almost like giving homage to the Italian culture, different parts of the Italian culture. I mean, that's part of it, like, because it varies so regionally that most people, even if you said pizza, like, oh, that's Italian. But no, it's not. Just like you said, it varies, it varies regionally. So I feel like that, there's a story in that too, because you were also, from what I've seen, is very intentional, even in, like the brick oven that you all made. It took a few months, right? And you had someone come over and build that for you guys. And
yeah, we had Stefano Ferrara, who actually, when I visited Italy with my wife, she was, I think, 7 or 8 months pregnant with my son. We went, and a lot of the people that we do business with, since we opened in 09, I met in like 06, 07, 04, different various parts of those years pre-open. And Stefano Ferrara, third generation oven maker. At the time when we were sourcing these ovens, no one knew he was in the United States, and no one would send thousands of dollars over to Naples, Italy to hopefully get an oven back. So when we flew there, we stayed with his family at his house. Same thing with the Caputo flour. Very few people knew what it was at the time, and now it's distributed globally. We went to the Antimo Caputo's facility in Naples. We visited his family. We saw how the flour was produced. Same things for the cheeses, same things for the tomatoes. And this is, over 12 years ago, and we've kept those same relationships. So, bringing that culture in and bringing that history is really what, it's why guests love us. It's why our staff, enjoys working with us, because it's more than just some business that was created out of nothing. Granted, we created it, never existed in before as far as Bavaro's, but it has all that history to support it. It has a lot of meaning, and you represent all these different families and cultures, and you almost kind of have your back up against the wall to do it right, because you don't want to give them a bad.
Right. Yeah. And you know, that, if you get into kind of the most defining qualities, the fact that that is part of what defines you and the restaurant and your family, your recipes, the presentation, the tradition, and the culture, that you're so intentional about it. Um, that tells so much, you know, uh, as far as how important the culture is in terms of representing it through the food. The fact that you all define the restaurant and the brand by the culture and staying true to that. You mentioned, your recipes and, 100-year-old recipes, and the way that you present the food, and you're very intentional. You went and met the families
Yeah.
behind these products and these ingredients that you're using. I mean, that shows that there's a lot of heart in how intentional you are when it comes to your menu and representing that. And so, and there's an element of respect too, in that you're representing all these other regions where, you mentioned your father's from the Bari region, right?
Bari, yeah.
Your own family and your heritage, supports that, but then because it's part of you, and you're very intentional about that, and you carry that through your brand. I feel like uh, that you find that in how, like when someone's looking at the food or their plate, that there's a story there. It's not just, oh yeah, we sourced it from the wholesale store, or what have you, right?
Yeah,
So
correct.
so it's really intentional. So
It's
go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's funny because what most people who haven't traveled to Italy, when they eat Italian food, American Italian food,
Mhm.
and then they come and they eat traditional Italian food, there's always this similar comment. Like our bolognese is traditional bolognese from Bologna, just like tagliatelle bolognese. You make it identical as they would over there. And here in the States, I believe it's more of a saucy bolognese versus a true bolognese being more hearty, more meaty. And, we'll get that feedback. So we just try and educate as much as we can.
Mhm.
This way, the perception is when you come in, expect traditional Italian food and not so much American or American Italian, because as food migrates to the U.S., it kind of separates itself from what was originally created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. And it sounds like I said, you're very intentional about that, about bringing that through with the ingredients and just the recipes in general, and carrying that tradition by having gone and met with so many people over there with your wife. So let's get into a little more about that travel. You mentioned having gone over there to Napoli. Where else have you been? And what are some of your favorite things to do or see? And if you think about those, what do you feel comes back with you in terms of kind of the spirit or way of life that you carry through the experience at the restaurant?
Yeah, so when we visited, we stayed in Naples a few days. Then we went to Firenze, uh, Tuscany region. Had some really nice meals there. I think one of my most memorable was a lasagna in Firenze when we were there, just checking out the stores and shopping, and just how simple it was. Like the simplest ingredients used and just crafted carefully. I think makes the most impact, and that's kind of like what we were doing with our business. We visited Rome, and there you started to see how different regions made different pizzas. It's very obvious as you visited different cities how the food changed. Um, I think another most memorable moment of the trips to Italy would be we took the local train mostly from Napoli straight across to Bari, and we visited Giovanato where my ancestors, my grandparents, are from, and we actually stayed in the house that my grandmother was born in over 100 years ago. And when we came, it was like they didn't really, the communication that we were coming wasn't received. So it was a pretty interesting trip. But part of that was they're like, okay, we're gonna go to the store, we're gonna make food right now, and just whipping up the food. You're talking fresh pasta, fresh cheeses, fresh sauce, and people say, well, what's the difference between eating at a Bavaro restaurant in Italy, it's the fact that they get their food right then and there, their ingredients right then and there, whether it be mozzarella or or a pasta of some sort or whatever they're cooking that day. It's coming right there versus being imported over here. So I think that's just the simplicity of it, and the difference is really that much.
Yeah. How cool that you got to go over there and actually experience, your heritage firsthand. I mean, that's amazing that you got to do that. And
Yeah,
so it's almost like it just drives home what you already do and what you already know, which is, kind of embedded in what you do at the restaurant, where it's, that very, like I said, family oriented, and you're very intentional about the recipes and paying homage to your heritage. And so I'm sure that kind of just brought it home and just solidified that feeling, and how you want the brand to represent all of that.
yeah, it's fair. I want to tell you a funny story about cannolis, right? Because everybody loves cannolis.
Yeah.
So I think we were open like 2 years, and that same food critic that helped us educate and get on the map had come back in and was going to write another review on the restaurant. So we were in the newspaper, and it went all throughout Tampa Bay, and it's pretty crazy. So this gentleman comes into the restaurant. I was working the pizza oven, and he's like, "Who's Don Bavaro?" And I'm at the pizza station, and I'm like, "I'm Dan Bavaro." He's like, "I'm Vito Bavaro," and I'm like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "Okay." I was like, "My grandparents are from Giovinazzo." He's like, "I'm from Giovinazzo." True. He must have been, at the time, I believe he was like 80 years old or 79, something like that. So it was like a beautiful, old school, beautiful experience. So he's like, "I want to talk to you." So we sat down, we had espressos, and we're talking because it was in between lunch and dinner. He came at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "I'm a pastry chef and I migrated to New Jersey." I was like, "I'm from New Jersey." And he's like, "I read that." And we talked about where and all this. He was from Clifton. He moved. Um, so what the outcome was is no one he knew, none of his family members wanted to learn the craft of pastry chef. And I said, "Listen, we're open 5.5 days a week. I would love to learn as much as you want to teach me on my days off." So what happened was we scheduled these days, and every week I would go to his house. I'd bring my wife, and the kids were at school. We drive over to St. Pete because he retired in St. Pete. And in his garage, he built this makeshift, bakery. So he would teach me sfogliatelle, cannolis, tiramisu, all these desserts that I had no clue. And he was just in awe that someone wanted to learn these old world recipes. I mean, from scratch. And baking is not easy. I learned that. I was like, I'll never own a bakery. I was like, but I will sell the tiramisu, especially the cannolis, because his cannolis were famous in New Jersey. So we focused on those, and we brought those into Bavaro's. And on our menu for the last 10 years, since we met him year two, our menu says, cannolis by Vito Bavaro, to pay homage to him and his craft. And we weren't related, but we just go back to that same region of Italy, that same town. He knew the street that my grandmother was born on because it's a small area.
Yeah.
And he actually was a contributor to the Giovinazzo newspaper. So one month, like 3 or 4 years after I met him and we're selling these cannolis, he sent me a magazine, and it was the Giovinazzo magazine. And he wrote a one-page article, had photos of me at the restaurant and the cannolis. And it's like, I was blown away because my family in Italy got that.
Wow.
It's just such an amazing story. And, look, when we hire on new people to join our business, we try and embed all this history and culture, and we say, look, it's not just a store-bought cannoli show. We learned this from a guy who spent his life, baking the cream, the shell. So that's how much passion and that's how much focus we have on the food we do. And I always tell people, they're like, look, when you eat at Bavaro's and the food is made right, there's nothing better. You're not going to get anything better. I don't care what restaurant you open,
Yeah.
who you are, Michelin star, I don't care. When our food is made right, which we
Mm-hmm.
hope is made right all the time, but there's
Mm-hmm.
factors in there, skill level and new staff learning, et cetera, and things happen. I get it, but
Mm-hmm.
overall our food is amazing. But when it's to the T, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing better. There's just too
Right.
much history and passion and love
Yeah.
that goes into our food.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of like this. It's like an eternal thing. So like the recipes haven't changed in so long. So when you take a bite of that, you're, you know, what a crazy story. That
Yeah.
and he's local, and it's almost like it was meant to be that he crossed
Just
paths
think
with
about that.
you.
It's like the
Hmm.
guy was born and raised in the same town as my grandma, probably a
Hmm.
little younger by a few years,
Right.
and then migrated to Jersey. I'm from New Jersey,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
then winds up in St. Pete. We wound up in Tampa, and then this one newspaper article just connects us.
Yeah.
Same last name, same type of industry, right? Right. He's in food. I'm in food.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Well, you
really
must be
important to
doing
us.
it right because that history and that culture found you, that many years later and across the globe. So, it was just a meant to be connection, and the fact that you still have it on your menu, and you pay homage to him in that way. And, uh, like you said, who's going to be able to learn and actually cherish that as a craft and
Yeah.
that old world way of uh, making that. So that's so awesome. That's so great. And so I see that you offer the cannolis and you have the gelatos and the tiramisu's on there, and so you have so many things. And that's just one great way that just shows how, like I said, and like you've been saying, is you take that to heart in terms of the recipes and the story and the history behind everything that's on your menu, and what you want to represent, and in what you kind of want to carry through that way of life. So you just had like a legend walk in and do that
It's
with you. So that's
unbelievable. Yeah.
awesome.
It's like, and I'm
That's really
thinking like,
great.
who doesn't want to learn? In my mind, I'm like,
Yeah.
who wouldn't want? I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, how much do I owe you? He's like,
Right.
no. He's like, I'm
Yeah.
passing history to someone who really wants to learn it. You
Yeah.
can't buy that. Like
Yeah. Oh no.
this is an old timer, an old school. They don't
Yeah.
make guys like that no more.
Right.
You're
Yep.
talking 80 hours a week in a bakery his whole life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, where are you ever going to get skill sets are dying?
Right.
Passion for like that is dying.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, how can we not,
Yeah.
grab that?
Right. And something you said too is that in Bari and region in the region of Bari, or even in Napoli, just throughout kind of that old world way. You mentioned that it's simplicity. So to us, we see that's like, oh my goodness, like how can you to use fresh ingredients and to get them that day, but then you have to plan it. How are you going to do that? And all the time it takes, and is it worth it? But it's almost like simplicity takes that refinement.
Yeah.
It's like you have to take things down to you have to take yourself down to your core. Actually, it's not even the ingredients themselves. It's just you have to be in that mindset in that way to where um, you cherish that way of doing things. And so clearly
Yeah.
you all do, and so something simple sounds like, oh, it's simple, but it's just
It's really
mozzarella
not.
and tomatoes and some basil or something, or just a shell and some cream, but it's really not. Yes, like you
It's
said.
not. So the whole thing with that is, and that's why I say when it's made right, because people
Yeah.
think, oh, it's so easy, I'll just slap it together. I'm like, no, here's the thing what happens with simplicity. With
Hmm.
simplicity is there's no room for error. Because if
Hmm.
one thing's off, the flavor profile is gone. You send a traditional caprese out, it doesn't have that dusting of sea salt, but it has the extra virgin first cold pressed olive oil. It's going to be off. It ain't going to be 100%. It'll be 90. It's not going to be 100%.
Yep.
The key is 100% all the time.
Yeah.
My team jokes at me. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Casino with
No.
so anyway, Robert De Niro's in there, and it's like a mob movie, and Robert De Niro's running he's running a casino in Las Vegas, and the guy tells him, "We want you to run a casino." He's like, "I'm gonna run it, but I gotta run it my way." So he's in the kitchen with the chef, and he cracks open a blueberry muffin, and then he cracks open another blueberry muffin. One has a lot of blueberries, the other one doesn't, and he looks at the chef, and he goes, I want an equal amount of blueberries in every muffin. And the
Oh my
chef looks at him. He's like, do you know how long that's going to take? He's like,
Uh-huh.
I want an equal amount of blueberries in every moment.
Oh my goodness.
So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
me when I visit my restaurants, and they just look at me
Hmm.
like I'm crazy. But they
Yeah,
get it, though. And we're all on the
yeah,
same page. It's just, sometimes you need to like hone in
yeah.
and dial back in.
But that's the old way of doing things. That's the right way of doing things. It's just
Yeah.
having the patience and the intention and the heart to keep true to that, which like you do. So the last question for you, Dan. I mean, I love that story too. That's amazing that you guys do that. If you think of kind of the going back to Italy a little bit, but if you think of the senses and sight, sound, taste, smell, the ambiance, the decor, you touched on a lot of those things. But is there anything else that you feel like you really, um, when someone walks in, what really hits them in terms of the senses?
Yeah, we try sense wise. I think you're going to get a little bit of all of it. We import our bricks actually from Chicago. It's just the old world part of that. They've 100-year-old bricks reclaimed. We bring in to help build out our restaurants. In Tampa, the floor was imported from Italy. A lot of tiles from Italy, uh, plates, forks, knives from Italy. Um, I think it kind of we've been told a lot that when they come into the restaurants and they eat, they capture that experience and everything is working in our favor. Well, we're really performing, and those in the restaurant world will know that what that means. It's just everything's hitting. Food's on point, service on point, music on point, lighting, you name it. Everything is just as best as it could be. People say that they come, they dine in, and they feel like they're not even in Florida.
Yep.
And ultimately, that's the goal.
Yep.
I've heard that from so many people, and that is a combination of sight. All your senses
Yep.
have to align, and we could do it. We've done it. That's our goal on a regular basis, and we just try and hit that all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
hope that answers your question. But
It does, yeah, it
yeah,
does, because then it's 100%. I mean, not just the food and the menu and being intentional about that, but you are truly a portal into experiencing the Italian culture the right way and the way it is, right here in your backyard. And so it sounds like you've accomplished that, and you're very true to that. In everything that you all do, and that's really amazing. I love the story. I mean, it's great. I want to
thank
encourage
you.
everyone to come and visit one of the locations, whether it's St. Pete or Tampa or Sarasota, and really taste that story. Your food embodies for themselves. And so, thank you so much for joining me for that for this talk and for sharing all of that with me.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.